another relatively quick live stream because I've got a lot of stuff to do tomorrow, but I do find an audience at 1 a.m. Y'all are like me, like to stay up late, so I figured why not do one more. Once again, chat about Freemasonry. Any thoughts you have on Freemasonry, positive, negative, or neutral? Let me know. I'll do my best to answer them, and I'm going to talk to you once again about my adventure and how you can join me on said adventure. I'll give you guys a few minutes. By the way, on a side note, it's my cat's birthday, so say happy birthday to Bandit, the greatest cat in the world. But let's give it a few minutes. Let's see who else joins us. And, as always, what it is that you guys want to chat about. Good morning. Good morning to you as well, Dylan. Thank you for wishing my cat a happy birthday. The greatest cat in the world is Bandit. You can hear Bandit right now in her litter box. You know, so she has no respect for the audio integrity of my live streams. But nonetheless, Dylan, welcome. Thank you for being here. I'm not sure if you're new to the stream or not. I don't recall seeing you before, so I do hope you will please hit that like button and subscribe button. And let me know how you're doing, and let me know, if you have any questions about Freemasonry, positive, negative, or neutral, I'd love to hear them. Bandit is turning, I guess she'd be 10 years old this year, so, which is pretty crazy to think, because when I think about that, it makes me feel very old. Let's give it a bit of time. Let's see who joins. And if they want to talk about anything. Thank you, Dylan. I truly appreciate that. When you say worry about Freemasonry, can I ask you if you mean worry as in you worry about its survival, or you worry about in the sense that you have concerns about its existence and you think it might be a more negative thing? Because I'm happy to discuss either one, either worry that you have with you, right? Because I definitely, myself personally, do often worry about whether or not Freemasonry, the extent to which Freemasonry can and will survive in the coming years. But I think if we all work hard at it, it can in fact survive, especially all Masons work hard at it. Oh, so you worry about them the other way. You worry about them in terms of you have concerns about their effect on the world. So Freemasonry is not satanic. In fact, Freemasonry is not aligned with any religion. It's not a religion at all. To be a Mason, you must believe in a supreme being, but the nature of that supreme being can be, I mean, spiritual, but Christian, Catholic, Protestant, Jewish, Muslim, Indigenous, First Nations. So, you know, but it is not satanic. I understand that sometimes conspiracy theorists like to claim it is, but it is not the case. And I've been a Freemason for about 20 years, been to about 3,000 meetings and events. If there was any Satanism in Freemasonry, I'd have heard of it by now. That's for sure. Thank you, Nick, for saying that. I truly appreciate that. I love Canada, so I mean, so I'm not sure, I'm not sure where the idea that I think Dan Brown actually might be responsible. So I've never heard the phrase as above, so below in any Masonic rituals of which I've been a part. Um, I've oh, it's not that cold. It's fine. You'd survive. So I've never heard that phrase in certainly not in emulation ritual, which is the type of Freemasonry rituals that I, would practice or would be part of my work. There is like Preston Webb, but Preston Webb is kind of more the American style of Freemasonry. I guess, from my perspective, first, I'm not sure to what extent at all, as above, so below, is a part of Masonic rituals or teachings. It's never been part of anything I've heard. But second, to my understanding, as above, so below is actually a positive teaching, right? It means you try to create as much as you can the kingdom of heaven on earth. But I'm not Christian. But that is kind of my understanding of it. So I've always understood it as kind of a more positive idea or ideal. And again, there's a difference between emulation Masonic ritual and, let's say, Preston Weber York Rite Masonic ritual, but it's not a phrase of which I'm aware. I don't even think it might be. It might be in. I think it's the Hermetic text, right? It's an Arabic source. Um, right? To my knowledge, it's initially an Arabic expression. Um, Nick, it is summer. That is true. So you'd be fine, Dylan. You'd be fine. By the way, please take a moment, hit the like and subscribe button. I'd very much appreciate it. What does the G in the square and compasses mean? I can't tell you that. That's a secret. For that, you got to join. Um, but it's a positive thing. I'll put it that way. So sorry, I can't give you a good answer there, but there are some secrets I choose to keep. Having said that, honestly, it's online. So if you were to look online, you could probably find it. Um, but I will never say one or the other. And the reason for that is not because, like a lot of people, the way I sometimes describe it, Kevin, is imagine you had a family recipe that was passed on from your great grandparents to your grandparents to your parents to you, and you plan to pass it on to your kids and then grandkids, etc., etc. Right. People may ask you, like, what's the secret ingredient in this recipe? What are some of the special things in this recipe? But you're not going to necessarily tell them because it's your family recipe and you want to maintain it for your family. That is the same way. So asking like what the G means in square and compass, it's like asking what the secret ingredient is in a recipe or what the ingredients are, right? It's to me part of the recipe that we pass down from generation to generation, and so I try my best to maintain some of those secrets. Every Mason I've found has kind of a different line as to what they will and will not disclose, but that's one of mine. Pinch of coriander, there you go. Why, when you say no point in joining, why, what do you mean by that, Dylan? I'm curious what you mean by that. I do know Albert Pike. I know Albert Pike quite well. There's an expression I like, which is Masons know Freemasonry because they're Freemasons, and people who are not Masons know Masonry through Albert Pike. Well, we'll go with that, Chris. We'll go with that because it certainly makes us seem cooler than we are. Only we know where to find it. That's the true Masonic secret. And just watch our numbers go through the roof of people joining. Well, he wrote a bunch of stuff. He didn't just write singular books, right? But he wrote Morals and Dogma. Um, is I think the book to which you're referring. Thank you, Tramites. I truly appreciate that. I hope you're doing well. If you are new to the stream, please take a moment, hit that like and subscribe button. I would truly, truly appreciate it. So yeah, I know Morals and Dogma. They've actually, Some Kind Soul made an audiobook I would put on YouTube, and I'm working my way through it once again, trying to get back through it. So we'll see if I'm successful at doing so. But it's been a very long time since I've read it. And And honestly, it is like I'm not like an Albert Pike hater. I think he provided a lot of value to the craft, but I also think he got a lot of things incorrect. And the thing to remember about Albert Pike is he was writing specifically for the southern jurisdiction of Scottish Rite Freemasonry, um, which, one of the biggest misconceptions about Freemasonry is that it's the same everywhere. And it's not, right? The thing about Freemasonry is depending on where you are, there'll be different ritual, different leadership, different rules and regulations, different bylaws. There is such a thing in Freemasonry as what's called territorial or jurisdictional sovereignty, which means, for example, Ontario Masons, our Ontario Grand Lodge can make rules for Ontario Masons, but it can't make rules for Texas Masons or Alabama Masons, right? And so if you look at Albert Pike, he wasn't making rules for anybody. He was giving his philosophical ideals, but those can be used as a way to examine the craft, but they aren't binding on, for myself, for example, Ontario Mason. If that made any sense. Let me know if it did or if it didn't. Traumatase, let me know how you're doing. Thank you so much for being here. I truly appreciate it. And let me know how your night's going. Are you like me, a night owl, or is it a different time zone you're in? Because it's 1 a.m. in the morning here. Good morning, Bong. How's it going? Oh, so you're like me, a night owl as well. I've heard the Freemasonry for Dummies. Freemasonry for Dummies is a great. That's Chris Hodap wrote that, and I thought he did a great job. So we all kind of bow down a little bit to Chris Hodap, and so I'd encourage you to check him out. Um, so your Freemasonry for Dummies is a great place to start. We're working on it. We're still working on it. We're not there yet. We still got to organize Cloak Night. It's a lot of work. It's not easy to organize, but we're gonna get there. I am at 2,239 subscribers. I'm one subscriber away from 2,240. So somebody on there subscribe. Have to take my garbage to the trash dump for a few hours. Usually gets a long line. Okay, well, I hope you do not get a crazy long. I hope you don't get a crazy long lineup. That's for sure. I hope that you're okay. Dylan, when you say I don't bow to any man, what do you mean by that? Vera Walker, we don't wear cloaks. Well, actually, there's some in the higher degrees, or actually, I guess there would be some dress up because it's kind of some of the higher degrees, not the right term, but some of the Scottish Rite, York Rite stuff, they have costumes for their degrees because it's meant to symbolize different historical time periods where they might have worn tunics, for example. Yeah, tunics or building things like that. So back in the day, stonemasons would wear cloaks and tunics. They'd also wear their aprons. And so we kind of adopted some of those. They are very kick-ass looking. So you say I bow to the Lord alone. Is the assumption, Dylan, that you're saying that we as Freemasons we bow down to each other, bow down to the worshipful master? Um, I think is kind of the implication you're making. So we do not worship Satan. We do not worship anything in particular. Like asking who Freemasons worship would be like asking who the football players worship, right? Because Freemasonry is not a religion. So, there are men of various beliefs in Freemasonry. Again, Christian, Muslim, Jewish, First Nations, Hindu, Buddhist. Some would be spiritual. But, asking what do Freemasons worship would be like asking what would be like asking what do football players worship or like what do musicians worship, right? Being a Freemason isn't a religious designation. It's either a club-based designation, like you belong to a club, or it is a skills-based designation, like you have a certain skill. Or you'd be even asking like what do plumbers worship, right? Freemasonry is again not a religion. Um, So, like I said, I've known men of not millions, I guess, but many different faiths, and I appreciate the fact that they are all part of Freemasonry. I think one of the things I love about Freemasonry more than almost anything else is the fact that it welcomes men of all different faiths. I think that makes it a very, very powerful organization, a very powerful civic organization that helps makes the world a better place. I can imagine. I guess you'd have to. Um, right? I feel like you'd probably have to get there. I hope that answered your question, Vera. I hope that made sense. I have no idea, Mystical, what you're talking about. And Vera, I don't get either of these references. Vera, don't call yourself ugly. That's not cool, right? We're not going to be having that in the chat at all. And the whole question, um, I mean, I would rather like Gandalf from Lord of the Rings because he was badass, I suppose. I mean, I can call myself ugly, but I'm the only one. So none of that, Vera. Oh, okay, why wear a cloak? Okay, I get it. It took a second to figure it out. Yes, Gandalf wore a cloak and he was kick ass, right? Sheldon did not. So, Dylan, it is not a rule that now there may be places where Freemasonry on a cultural basis or society is looked down upon for different reasons. Conspiracy theorists been talking smack, whatever it is. So they may be discouraged from mentioning they're a Freemason because again, maybe they live in a country where there's a lot of suspicion about Freemasonry. Um, and so they may be hesitant to. It is a rule that I'm not allowed to disclose if anybody else is a Freemason, and unless they give me permission to. Like on my podcast, they obviously give me permission, and that's completely fair because it would be very, I think, rude to share information about someone else who's not interested, right? I think that it'd be disrespectful if I saw somebody on the street and said, "Hey, that person there is a Freemason," because he may not want to tell people that he's a Freemason. He may be a very private person and just want to keep that information private. No different than he may not want to tell people if he's married or divorced or like who knows anything. His job, he may just be the type of person who wants to keep it private. So you have to respect his rights to do that. You have to respect his rights to disclose what he wants to disclose. That's a matter of politeness. But again, there is no rule. You can tell, I can tell anybody I want that I'm a Freemason. And that is true pretty much across the board. Again, there may be a country where Freemasonry is looked down upon or frowned upon, in which case they may not want to. But I hope that made sense. But yeah, I'm always happy to tell anybody that I am a Freemason. Um, and it's one of my favorite things to talk about. I hope that made sense. I hope that made sense. Let me know if it did. He was. He was. He was one of those kind of great Enlightenment Freemason thinkers. The Enlightenment gave birth to a lot of, well, Freemasonry predates the Enlightenment, but I feel like the Enlightenment is where Freemasonry really kind of developed its modus operandi, um, if that makes sense. It's where I think in the Enlightenment period, so Voltaire, Ben Franklin, George Washington, um, Diderot, Condorcet, all these cats, these Enlightenment thinkers, really kind of cemented and kind of created, turned Freemasonry really into what it has been ever since, I think. So Ben Franklin was a Freemason and a very, very active contributor to Freemasonry. Honestly, I think when you look at people who did the most to kind of cement the legacy of Freemasonry, Ben Franklin is far better than, say, Albert Pike. No worries, Dylan. A lot of people have that thought for different reasons. Conspiracy theorists, they see stuff online, they hear something. That's one of the reasons why I love doing these streams, is because it gives me a chance to talk to people, tell them about my Masonic experiences, why I love it, why I think it's important, and encourage them to maybe think a little bit differently. I mean, yeah, Ben Franklin is one of my favorite Masons, that's for sure. I thought he was incredible. I thought he did a really great job, really amazing job. And yeah, I was really impressed with all of the work that he did. So no, absolutely, he did like you were saying, he did a lot. And he was one of the first people to actually write about Freemasonry. Well, Vera, if I understand what you're saying, um, which I think I understand what you're saying. I don't think that's necessarily a religious or political. Well, so first, Freemasonry isn't a religious or political denomination, right? It's not. It's neither religious nor political. But I think broadly, what you're saying is it's possible for people to join groups and clubs and organizations with good intentions, but find out later that those groups are actually not what they purported to be. Um, and that's always going to be a risk with anything, right? And certainly Freemasonry is no different than anything else, right? It's very possible, right? Even me, right? I mean, it's very possible I could just be sprouting nonsense. Like you kind of have to rely on, to a certain extent, um, my knowledge of the craft and my time in the craft, 20 years, and hopefully a certain level of discernment. But healthy skepticism of any group is, I think, comfortable. Healthy skepticism of any religion any political organization, healthy skepticism of any club or organization is always healthy. I think the danger is when that skepticism begins to color everything you look at. So it's like a balance, right? If that makes any sense. But I don't think there's anything wrong with being skeptical. Um, Even if you look at something like, say, professional sports like football, right? It probably helps to be a little bit skeptical of football when it comes to the way they treat their players, and the injuries they can get and hiding information about concussions. A certain level of skepticism is always healthy. So the reason it's called craft, Dylan, is Freemasonry evolved actually from stonemasonry. Um, Stonemasonry, the creating and building of things through stone. Stone houses, cathedrals, could be a wall, could be anything, right? They were building things from stone. And so they were called, one thing they could be called is craftsmen or stone craftsmen because they were crafting structures from stone. And so eventually the term craft just kind of carried itself from operative Freemasonry to speculative Freemasonry or my type of Freemasonry. So there you go. But I never really thought of craft as sounding witchy, but I guess that could make sense. I mean, The Craft was a movie about witches. So, and I do really like that movie, The Craft, because thanks to that movie, it encouraged the creation of one of my favorite television shows of all time, Charmed. Um, so, Charmed is a great TV show. Good, Spirit. I'm glad you had a great lodge meeting tonight. That's awesome. And by the way, I do want to just mention that is very true, Mystical. I agree with that 100%. I do just want to mention that I am going. Thank you. I can't pronounce your name. I'm very sorry. Uma Sankari. Thank you. I appreciate that. That's very kind of you. Um, I do want to just remind everybody that I am going on an adventure. I'm going to be traveling to the Philippines and Brazil to take part in some Grand Lodge events and some Masonic events. I cannot wait. But because of that, I just want to keep in mind I'm not going to be able to keep these schedules up as usual. So please, please, please follow me on my social media sites, whether it be Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, whatever it is. You can ask me which one is best to follow me on. I'll do my best to let you know. Or, follow me on them all, right? Ask me for the links because it is really, really, really important that we as Freemasons, so that you follow me on those sites so you can keep up to what I'm doing because I can't maintain the schedule, but you can see what I'm doing in the Philippines, see what I'm doing in Rio de Janeiro, see what I'm doing around the world when it comes to Freemasonry and exploring the ways Freemasonry was and is relevant to the communities in which it's located. It's going to be incredible in the Philippines. I can't wait. I've never really had the chance to take part in Freemasonry in person around the world. It's always primarily been North America. And because, as I always say, Freemasonry is so different wherever you go, I think it's just really important to show that in person, as opposed to, during the pandemic, I was lucky enough to take part in a lot of virtual events around the world because, a lot of lodges moved to online meeting spaces at that time. But I'd rather be doing more stuff in person. And I can't wait. And again, like I said, it's important to do this in person because, again, Freemasonry is not the same everywhere. Freemasonry in Canada is different than Freemasonry in the Philippines, is different than Freemasonry in South America. It has commonality of purpose, commonality of brotherhood, but there are differences. And so that's really important to keep in mind as well. Thanks for showing me. You're welcome, Veer. I appreciate you being here. And whatever your thoughts are on Freemasonry, I just appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. Sorry, Dylan, I'm not gonna agree with you on that one. I'm not gonna say I agree with everything that the governments did or did not do with the pandemic. Obviously, every government's different, but I do, believe that COVID was a legitimate issue and people had different ways where they tried to deal with it. What's Masonic mean? Masonic refers to Freemasonry, which is basically an umbrella term for social groups and clubs which trace their origins to stonemason guilds. The majority of these groups are fraternal, so they're male exclusive, but there's also female exclusive Masonic organizations and mixed Masonic organizations as well. So, no, Dylan, you can say it. I mean, I've heard the term scandemic before, but I just do not believe it myself. Um, well, I want to go to Brazil because they're having the 90th anniversary of the Grand Lodge of South America Northern Division, and I want to go check that out. So, I think it's going to be pretty incredible to see. Um, uh, Sankari, I hope you'll be so kind as to hit the like and subscribe button. I would truly appreciate it. Um, Thank you so much for joining. I was very lucky. To my knowledge, I never caught COVID. I started traveling as soon as I could, and when you were traveling during those times, you had to get tested all the time, before you got on the plane, basically, you had to get tested. So I got tested pretty regularly, and I'm very lucky in that I never tested positive. Now it's possible I did get it during those periods where I wasn't being tested and never had any really like severe symptoms. But yeah, I feel very lucky that I never, to my knowledge, again got it. I got vaccinated right away. As soon as I could. I think I got like my fourth booster shot. So I don't know. Seemed to have worked out for me okay. I know for many people though it didn't work out well for them. So I don't want to make light of it in that sense. I know some people who got vaccinated and still had COVID complications and COVID problems. So I don't want to, everybody had a different experience, and I know it's very challenging for a lot of people. Freemasonry means you can do whatever the. I mean, I can promise you that is not the case, Vera. It might make Freemasonry more fun, I guess, if that was the case, and I could do whatever I wanted. But in fact, in Freemasonry, in some ways, it's the opposite. We're really encouraged to be more respectful of the laws of either a country where we live or a country where we're visiting to set a good example for others. So yeah, I guess at least I'm not sure where you're getting that from, but that's not been, nor ever has it been my experience that has been the case. X is back. Hello, X. Welcome back. Thank you for being here. Um, I hope you're doing well. I hope that you will let me know what's going on. Another night owl, which is great to see. And please, as always, hit that like button and follow me, X, on my other social media channels because I'm going to be traveling starting tomorrow, which is less time to be here on stream. I'm going to try to stream as often as I can on all my different channels, but I'm probably going to have much less time to do it. So it would be really helpful if you follow me on social media, um, Instagram, Facebook, etc., etc. How does a lodge meeting go? Well, so it depends on the type of meeting you're having because there's two basic types. There's your business meetings, which really I wouldn't, it's not business in the sense of making money, it's administrative meetings where you're basically doing the administrative work of the lodge. So you open the lodge, there's a prescribed method by which you open the lodge, and we do that to show respect to all the Masons who came before us by keeping their traditions. And then, different lodges will do it differently, right? As I say, Freemasonry is not the same everywhere. But very generally, there's, your business meeting. You talk about the minutes from previous meetings. You talk about accounts, correspondence. You usually have a section where you talk about any brothers who may be sick or ill or who may need assistance, or anything happening in the community that Masons could maybe help with. Um, you may have a bit of Masonic education, so they'll talk about like some interesting fact about the history of the lodge, um, events coming up, and then you either close the lodge and go and have refreshments. There's usually, there's always like a repast of some sort, a dinner, drinks, or more and more often, lodges are actually choosing to have dinner at 6 before the meeting starts. So they'll have their dinner first, and then they'll have the meeting, and then they'll have some maybe desserts after. So that's what you see on one of those. And then you have your degree nights, which is when you have a Mason joining or advancing in the craft. And those are rituals we do to kind of mark somebody's progress in Freemasonry. Again, and we do those rituals as a way to create bonds of brotherhood through shared experiences, as well as a way to respect those brothers who came before us, including our stonemason ancestors, who themselves had rituals to mark progress. If that makes any sense. I hope it did. Um, so, Vera, why do you say rituals is the problem? I think rituals is one of the best parts about Freemasonry. Um, I think it's the way that Freemasons kind of like. So for me, for example, I never knew my grandfather. My grandfather died before I was born on my dad's side, but he was a Mason. And after joining the lodge, I did feel closer to him, like I knew him better because I went through the same things that he went through. And when I say went through, I mean it sounds more ominous than it was. It wasn't anything particularly strenuous or difficult. It's just I had the same experience he did. And so it made me feel closer to him, and it made me feel closer to my father as well, who was a Mason, still alive, but knock on wood. So it just made me feel closer to my family. And that's kind of the goal of Freemasonry, right? But ritual itself, I mean, ritual, like Mystical says, rituals don't have to be, rituals can be, you wake up in the morning and maybe you exercise for an hour. Or maybe you have a coffee and you have the coffee a certain way. Rituals like that are just part of life. Um, Weddings, graduations, baptisms, going to court, those are all types of rituals, right? So it's human nature to create rituals. That's kind of what we do. So yeah, so it's brothers. Dylan mentioned can't have females in lodge. So Freemasonry traditionally is thought of as a fraternity, and there are like I'm part of the fraternal aspect of it. Because there's always been throughout history, a desire for both men and women to gather in their own spaces, fraternities. Like what is the man cave, right? But this kind of idea is kind of blown up. But there are also, again, there's women specific Masonic groups where it's exclusive for women. There's also Eastern Star, which is where men and women meet in the lodge rooms. So, um, it's what's the word I'm looking for? It's one of those situations where women are much more a part of Freemasonry than a lot of people in the mainstream like to say. Joe Cap, I do hope you'll hit the like and subscribe button. Um, the Sodom, well, so Joe Cap, I mean, in some ways that would make lodge meetings much more exciting, but that has never been my experience. So maybe I'm missing out. Who knows? Maybe I'm just not handsome enough to get that part of Freemasonry. But I can tell you, my Freemasonry experiences have been much more boring than what Joe Cap seems to think they are. Um, I mean, who doesn't want to worship a severed goat head? In fairness, Mystical. Ritual. So, Vera, I would agree with that. But I guess what I'd say is the reason ritual is different than good habits is I would say what ritual is meant to do is create bonds of friendship through shared experiences. So, for example, I wake up in the morning, I brush my teeth, I have a cup of coffee, I meditate for 5 minutes, I go to work. That's a personal ritual of how I wake up in the morning. And that is about me getting centered with myself. And my neighbor may have a completely different morning ritual. And so that morning ritual, is not bonding me to anybody else. So you could argue it's just a good habit. What the ritual does, though, if I wake up in the morning and I go to the gym with 7 other people and all 7 of us work out together, then I would constitute that as a kind of ritual, because not only is it a good habit for ourselves personally, but it's creating a bond of friendship between all the people in the group. Now we have shared experiences on which we can draw, and the rituals of, what the gym is like and the exercises that we do and how we do them. So it's more about bonding with each other. I mean, yeah, hazing is a ritual, and we do not haze, though. That's right. So that's a good thing to keep in mind. Some people, I'm not going to say it's never happened in past Masonic history, but thankfully that's a relic of the past, and as it should be, because I don't think there's any place for hazing in Freemasonry. Um, so yeah, so I've never seen any hazing in Freemasonry, and I've been a Mason for 20 years. I mean, they can be the same, they can be different. I think kind of all these terms start to get a little bit funky. I'd say ritual, it's prescribed steps done with others with the purpose of forming bonds of friendship. So, if I join a gym and I join a training class with 10 other people, and it's like, you have to do this step, then this step, then this step, then this step, it kind of becomes a ritual, right? Culture bonds people together, but there's no planned steps. The culture just kind of is what it is. If that makes any sense. I hope it does. I agree with mystical. As a general rule, I do not believe in the paranormal. I'm very skeptical of the paranormal. I think it's fun to think about. I love scary movies. I love horror movies. It's my favorite thing in the world is scary movies and horror movies. But I am very hesitant to take it beyond the realm of entertainment. Having said that, I do encourage all Masonic lodges and bodies to investigate the paranormal as an economic system. For example, a lot of buildings now are holding ghost tours where they'll bring people in, they'll talk about ghost stories in their building. A lot of Masonic buildings are older and have some ghost stories in them. So, do Freemasonry members cast spells? I mean, not to my knowledge. Again, it's casting spells is not part of any Masonic ritual I've ever been a part of. Now, I have been told and met some Wiccan Freemasons who may cast spells on their own time. I don't know kind of what I know what Wiccan means based on watching Charmed and Practical Magic, two of my favorite pieces of media, but I don't know what they do in their own time. But again, like asking do Freemasons cast spells is kind of like asking do football players cast spells? I mean, it might be possible. There's a few football players who are into like Wiccan spirituality. Um, but there is no like consistent set of religious or spiritual beliefs amongst Freemasons. Every Freemason will have his own spiritual and religious beliefs. And so it's always possible there may be some, again, Wiccan Freemasons who spend their nights casting spells. I have no idea, but it's certainly not something I've seen. I've never seen a spell cast in a Masonic lodge. So, um, for what if that makes any sense. But again, when you say like, do Masons believe in X or Y? What you want to do is, replace Freemason with another group and see if it makes sense. So, for example, do football players cast spells? Do football players, believe in what, if you were to ask what do football players believe in? Well, it depends on the football player. What do Masons believe in? Depends on the Mason. Um, the zeitgeist, I mean, I believe that just as a practical thing, of course, there is a zeitgeist, which, is just the cultural norm of the time. right? So the zeitgeist of the culture today could be, a social media culture type of thing. That's kind of a zeitgeist, but I'm not sure what Moloch references. What do I think about Manly P. Hall? I'm not a huge fan. Again, I'm not a huge fan of those Masonic writers who wrote this mystical, spiritual stuff. I haven't read his stuff in ages, to be honest, so I may be missing out on something. I have to go back and try to remember it again, but yeah, not a huge fan. My Freemasonry runs more towards, for example, um, like Harry Houdini, who famously hated psychics and spirituality and stuff like that. Houdini was a great Mason, or I'd say, but my Masonic influences, the place and era and time that I believe best captures the best parts of Freemasonry were the Enlightenment era, and those Enlightenment era thinkers like Voltaire and Diderot and Condorcet and Ben Franklin, who I think best exemplified the best parts of Freemasonry. So again, Vera, Masons believe in a supreme being, but the nature of that supreme being is completely up to them. So it'd do be like asking, do football players believe in Jesus Christ? I mean, I'm sure many football players do. I'm sure many football players have a different faith. Like I know Masons who are Muslim, Christian, Jewish. I know many Freemasons who believe in Jesus Christ. And I know many who are Muslim, again, many who are Jewish, many who are Hindu, Buddhist, which is a wonderful thing. It's the thing I love about Freemasonry the most, is that it's open to people of who believe in a supreme being, which is in and of itself a um, a enlightenment term. See again, Vera, like there is no singular Masonic belief. I mean, Masons, like I said, I know honestly a lot of it is going to depend on just where you happen to live and what the predominant religious or spiritual beliefs in your area. So, for example, if you live in a community which has a very high Muslim population, the lodge is probably going to have a lot of Muslim members. If you live in a place where there's a high Christian population, it's going to have a lot of Christian members. Um, but again, like you wouldn't say, well, football players believe in Lucifer because football players are allowed to have any religious belief that they want to play football, right? You wouldn't say people who go to court believe in Lucifer because they're allowed to take an obligation to tell the truth on any number of different holy books that's at the courthouse, right? So again, when you say many Masons believe in Lucifer, it's like, I mean, I'm sure there's some Luciferian Freemasons, but none that I've ever met. In my experience, the predominant, and this is very general, the predominant belief amongst Masons is usually kind of Christian, or at least vaguely Christian. Like they wouldn't necessarily be able to quote Bible verses or anything like that, but if you ask them like their conception of God, it'll most likely be kind of a Christian idea of it. They'll kind of think of Jesus, they'll think of the Ten Commandments, they'll think of Moses. Um, um, uh, but yeah, again, you get more into like in Morocco, I'm sure that the majority are Muslim. Because I think when it comes to this idea of football players, it's more this idea of kind of, I think because so many people give Freemasonry or believe that Freemasonry, there's a religious context to it, what they tend to do is assume, or not even assume, but yeah, I guess assume is the right word. Pick your term. Because a lot of people tend to view Freemasonry as kind of this religious, spiritual group, they tend to believe that Freemasons must have some type of belief or doctrines or some special holy book or whatever it might be, right? But they don't make that same assumption about other groups of people. And so it could be football players, it could be a soccer team, it could be musicians, it could be a union of like carpenters. It's more the idea that you would never assume that those other groups have a consistent religious or spiritual belief, right? So when thinking about Freemasonry, I think it's better to think about the lodge or the group of Masons more as akin to, let's say, football players or a union or like a non-religious, non-political entity, as opposed to something that has a religious doctrine. Now, obviously, there may be certain common beliefs in, when I say beliefs, certain common traits amongst non-religious, non-political groups. So, for example, going back to the football player analogy, football players are likely to believe in things like teamwork or be good at working in teams. They're likely to believe in hard work. They're likely to believe in exercise, physical fitness, um, by virtue of what they do, right? But those wouldn't be spiritual beliefs. In the same way, Masons are likely to be more open to um, working in a group because lodges are groups. They're more likely to be open to democracy and democratic ideas because decisions in a lodge are made by votes. You vote yay or nay, and everybody gets a vote, right? They're more likely to probably be interested in history, joining a historical organization. But again, you wouldn't constitute those as spiritual in nature, right? Those are more traits that kind of would lead you to that direction. There are a lot of veterans in Freemasonry. I've known a few. There used to be a lot more. The two great boom periods, Joe Cap, in Masonic membership was the 1920s and the 1950s. And in both of those cases, it was driven primarily by veterans returning from World War One and World War Two who wanted to, it seems like what they wanted to maintain is some type of sense of brotherhood that they had while fighting in a civilian setting, as well as they want to serve their communities, right? They served their country overseas. They want to continue that service and they join kind of a service club, which Freemasonry often can be. That's not its primary purpose, but for many, it is a way to serve the community. Um, though that kind of dropped away a lot after the Vietnam War. You didn't see the same numbers of veterans joining, which I think there's a lesson in there for Freemasonry. So Lucifer, it's interesting. That's a whole other can of tuna. I've been learning a little bit more about that in my just because I've been curious about that, and I met somebody not in Freemasonry, but on my other YouTube stuff. It's a very interesting kind of idea, which I find very fascinating. It's the idea of like um, a distinction between Satan, the biblical Satan who was an angel and rebelled against God and was cast down, versus Lucifer is a separate entity who is almost like a Prometheus figure. Like he is the one who, just as Prometheus brought fire to humans, otherwise known as, fire was a metaphor, I think, for knowledge, and then was punished. Lucifer brought knowledge to humans by getting, Eve to eat the apple and then got punished as well. But there's separate kind of entities to my knowledge, but this is way, way over my skis. I'm not a religious expert by any means. I believe in a supreme being, but I don't necessarily believe in any one particular faith. Um, so, but this idea of who was Lucifer versus Satan, are they the same? Are they different? I know very little about it, but I do find it very interesting. Um, again, because it seems like it was almost a copy and paste of the Prometheus myth from ancient Greece, where again you have this figure who brings knowledge to humans and then gets in trouble. Um, but I don't like again, I don't know near enough about it to say more. Um, No context in any Bible says otherwise. So, but again, like I said, I've read parts of the Bible, but I've never read the whole thing. I just think it's an interesting idea, the idea of what does it mean to bring knowledge, right? What are the dangers of bringing knowledge? What does that mean? Because you could argue, right? Like, what is the atomic bomb except for an example of incredibly dangerous knowledge? And is that an example of like Luciferian knowledge, right? This knowledge that can destroy the whole world? Um, or is it always worth trying to search for knowledge? What if the search for knowledge leads you to be able to build better weapons or discover new diseases or who knows what, right? I just think it's a fascinating idea, this idea of the search for knowledge. To me, I tend to come down, and Freemasonry as well, I think, based on my understanding of the ritual, tends to kind of come down more on the side of it is important to search for knowledge. The way to become a better person is to try to seek knowledge and learn more, especially about things like um, geometry and the liberal arts and sciences. And I tend to believe education is ultimately a good and a good thing. That's a very Enlightenment ideal, which has carried through Freemasonry. Yeah, Rosicrucians and Freemasonry do have a lot of similarities. They're not the same thing by any means, but it is interesting to see their kind of intertwined history. So yeah, I do find it fascinating. I enjoy thinking in metaphor. I think thinking metaphor is, in some ways, kind of a lost art, but is very valuable. But thank you everybody for joining. I hope you're all doing well. I hope if you're new, you'll hit the like and subscribe button. I hope you're having a great day, great night. It's 2 in the morning, and I still have my fish fry to get to tomorrow, so I got to take off soon. I got to get some sleep. Um, Joe Cap, you are an audience member of the Square and Compass live stream, and I appreciate you being here very much. Um, Messi is back. Welcome, Messi. I mean, I enjoy music these days, I guess. My favorite song of all time, Vera, is Simple Man by Leonard Skinner. And my second favorite song is Prodigal by Blacktop Mojo. I like to mention that because I feel like Blacktop Mojo doesn't get near the love that they should. So, Ben Franklin, famous Mason, said in what, 17 something or other, said, beer is proof that God loves us and wants us to be happy. I changed that because I don't drink. So what I would say is music is proof that God loves us and wants us to be happy because I love music. Thank you, Dylan. I'm going to need it because I'm going basically around the world. I'm going to be getting very little sleep over the next few days. So, it's going to be a lot of fun. Follow me on social media. Follow me on Instagram. Follow me on Twitter, etc., etc. Um, Thank you, Bong. I'm going to be keeping everybody up to date. So make sure you find me on socials. Make sure you also find me on Patreon, patreon.com/Square and Compass. I'll be there as well. I mean, I think love could be the answer. I think that's fair, Vera. Um, I think that's as good as anything else, right? To love one another, um, to see ourselves in others, which is something they kind of teach. Yes, Dylan, Facebook as well. Let me leave a link so, or at least write it down in the chat. And then what you can do is you can copy and paste because the hyperlinks don't always work in the chat. Um, oh, for heaven's sakes, if I could do that. It is. I'm just trying to get on here. All right, here we go. Facebook.com/Square Compass Essex. I will definitely not wear a cloak, Vera. I don't want to draw attention to myself in that way. I'll show off my square and compasses. It's on my wheelchair, but I feel like wearing a cloak would only draw attention. And, I don't want to end up in getting questioned by police in India as to, or sorry, the Philippines as to why I'm wearing this cloak thing. I have to keep in mind how things look to other people. So good call, Vera. I support that. Yeah, I'm in a wheelchair. Um, which, by the way, I would not wear I would not wear a cloak because the cloak would be a pain in the butt because it gets caught in the wheelchair. I'll tell you this one thing. One thing about Freemasonry is it used to be traditional that when we were having like a fancy pants meeting, like a degree night, we would wear tuxedos and white gloves. These white gloves would go on our hands to kind of, it was like a symbol of the aristocracy back in the day. And they kind of adopted it as a way to look extra fancy. When I joined in 2007, we never wore the gloves. It just wasn't a thing. It kind of fell out of fashion. But then in 2012, I think it was, we ended up getting this worshipful master in the East who was he was responsible for governing the lodge. And he decided he wanted us to wear white gloves on special occasions. And I cannot tell you how hard it was to push my wheelchair or wheel my wheelchair while wearing these gloves because you had no grip on them. So your hands would be slipping as you're trying to wheel in this stupid lodge room. I hated those things. And I used to beg him every meeting. I'd be like, can we please not wear the gloves? And he thought it made us look more dignified. So every degree I had to wear those gloves. I used to drive me insane. But, I miss that guy. He was a cool dude. I haven't seen him for years. He had to move away, but I really liked him. He was a good dude, despite the fact that he created for me a pain in the ass. Um, yeah, they were never kept clean. I could not keep those white gloves clean to save my life because I'm always wheeling in the wheelchair, which meant any dirt and grime on the wheels ended up on the gloves. Oh my God. And sometimes you had to as part of the rituals, you had to pick something up and move it somewhere else and you couldn't grip the thing. You've just brought up a whole, I think, I don't want to say PTSD. I don't make light of that. You're going to have flashbacks though to those horrendous white gloves. I'm trying to move with them. He was a good dude though. I liked him a lot. He was very friendly. That is smart, Vera. I get that. That makes sense to me. I should have done that. I should have put sticky tape on them even or something like that. Something where you could get decent grip. Because I let me tell you, what would normally take me 5 seconds to wheel from I don't know, 3 feet. It would take me 5 seconds normally or whatever it would be. It would take me 15 seconds and we'd sitting there just. But he was always and to his point, he was well, the whole, it kind of goes to this idea a little bit of ritual, but not really. But this idea of we're trying to create bonds through shared experiences. Part of that means all looking a consistent way, uniforms are there for a reason. And Freemasonry doesn't really have uniforms in the same sense. We have our aprons, but if you have to show up in a tuxedo and you have white gloves, that's kind of your Masonic uniform for the night. So, just stop slipping. Now you sound like him, Dylan. Now you sound like my 2012 worshipful master. So I don't know what I did to you that you decide to bring these memories up, but that's fine. But thank you, everybody, for joining. It's been a great stream. Thank you, Vera. Thank you, Dylan. Thank you, everybody, for Joe, for all your questions. I truly do appreciate it. I will have a great time on my trip. Bong, thank you for being here as well. And Vera, I think love is the answer is a pretty decent answer. I like that one a lot. And I think you're right. Loving our neighbors as we love ourselves, loving our enemy. I think, again, not being a Christian myself, but I do think that this idea of loving your neighbor is one of the most revolutionary and powerful ideas in Christianity. So, um, um, so yeah, I think it's a good answer. Just stop slipping. Oh, I should have told my gloves that. I should have told my gloves, listen, gloves, just stop slipping. It's what I should have done because they were, thankfully, the gloves really have gone back out of fashion. I don't think they're coming back. I think 2012, if I recall correctly, was the last gasp of using gloves in Masonic ceremonies. At least I hope so. Just watch. Some Mason's going to see this and turn around and go like, "We need to do it." And next thing I know, we're all going to be wearing gloves again. I will keep you updated for sure, Bong. I'll do streams whenever I can. But like, subscribe, follow, join, all those things you can do on social media, and I will keep you guys informed. All right. Um, Thank you so much, and I will see everybody again soon. Have a great night. Get some rest, and I'll see everybody soon.